Welcome everyone, it's the episode of Let's Talk. I'm super happy today to be with Kunal Agarwal. Kunal, how are you doing?
Doing great, Thomas. Super excited to talk to you. Been following your podcast for a while, and I love how this is one of those podcasts that you actually get deep down and technical. So super excited to share what we're doing.
Well, that means a lot coming from you. I have many questions, as you can imagine. I guess I say that to every episode, but every episode is true. I have many questions, many topics that I want to cover with you. I really like the perspectives that you have on a lot of the topics we're going to cover. So, without further ado, I would love for the people who might not know you, do you think you could do a short introduction of yourself?
Yeah, I'm Kunal Agarwal, co-founder and CEO of a company called Unravel Data. We focus on data observability and Finops, which has automation built into it. We service large data-driven companies, not just the big companies, but companies whose business is data, and making sure that they're able to get all their data outcomes without the necessary toil. That's really our specialty. But yeah, super excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, thanks. All right. So this gives us a little bit of your mission and what you're doing because you're still working here. But maybe if I were to ask you, what's your state of the art, like not from a technical perspective, but like as a human being, like what are you trying to achieve? What mission are you on? What would you answer?
Yeah, it's very simple. We see data systems just being very powerful in every industry using them. But once we start working with all these data companies and the data engineers and the data scientists inside there, what we've seen is they are not spending their days productively. In fact, they're spending 50% of their time doing things that they should not really be doing, like firefighting issues and taking care of reliability problems or taking care of performance issues or cost issues. Um, so we were on a mission to say, look, if we can help them take away all of those tasks that honestly they do not want to do off their plate and automate it for them, then they can focus on doing the exciting things and actually delivering value for their companies. So
Yeah.
we are leveling the playing field in that way and helping companies of all sizes really make the most out of their data assets.
Hmm. That's a very interesting mission. And like you mentioned, I really want to get into data observability. Uh, I learned some concepts recently, and you've been implementing those concepts for some time. So I'll definitely come back on this. Awesome. Could we make a throwback on maybe key moments of your career since maybe you graduated university and like having like insights on like lessons that you learned along the way? Would that be possible?
Yeah, yeah. Look, while learning at university and then I was doing a job as well, I was fortunate enough to see this entire big data revolution really happening at a very, very genesis or starting point. So this is like back in 2011, 2012 when Hadoop came out. It was the only distributed computing platform back then. And obviously the
Yeah.
world has changed a lot since then. But what was cool is we were working with a company, Johnson& and Johnson, and these guys, um, they were trying to do something on these commodity hardware using free open source software that they could download and run
Hmm.
distributed computing on. And if you go back to that day, like there was only a couple of other technologies that could actually do some large scale processing, like Teradata or even Vertica, but those things were expensive.
Hmm.
And this technology called Hadoop was fascinating because it could do so many good things and was really powerful in how it could process data and the types of data it could do. Um, but it was rough around the edges. There was a lot of things that needed to get done for anybody to actually get productivity out of it, and that meant that it was limited to the hackers and the tinkerers, and not really for everybody. And that was really the light bulb moment, which was, hey, if we can simplify these data operations and make it so that not just 5 people inside a company can use it, but all the engineers inside a company could use it, then they could really get valuable insights from these environments and data stacks.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, that's what's happened. If you look back now, a couple of transition points have happened, right? One is we've gone from just one system to multiple systems. First, it's just Hadoop, and now it's Spark and Kafka and all these cloud data warehouses. And things have gone from on-premises to the cloud. But I think the biggest change is people from every department, and not just the engineering department, are now starting to use data environments. If you go into a company, the product guys are using it, the marketing guys are using it, the finance guys are using it, the legal teams are using it. And with AI, many more teams and almost every project inside a company is going to be dependent on using AI. Um, so our place in that world was to simplify all of this and to make sure that everybody can do it. And yeah, it's been interesting journey to go and see all those things actually turning out true. But there's still a long way to go.
Awesome. Okay, thanks for this retrospective. So I would like to come back to Unravel Data. So you kind of described the overall idea. You kind of discussed about the how you unify um, the entire company around engineers and so on. I would like maybe to tackle the entrepreneurial side of your personality. Um, how did you? So you talked a lot about your mission, and but like, were you always intrigued in what we could say like an entrepreneur, even though I think it have many definitions, but were you always trying to build and create things, or how did you went on into this path of all right, I'm going to build this tool because this is actually missing, and I understood, which is quite related maybe to your previous answer, but do you have further insights on entrepreneurship in general?
Yeah, I was fortunate to know at a very young age that I wanted to start a technology company. And
Okay.
that was very crisp and clear in my mind since I was 14, 15 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so many things to go and do in technology, though. And the reason I was drawn to it is it's only technology that can actually change things dramatically in one lifetime. There's nothing else that can. And in fact, even in the last 10, 15 years, things have changed, two times, three times over.
Yeah.
So it moves really, really fast. And the way to think about a company is, at least that's how I think about it, is
Mm-hmm.
not from the technology perspective, but what's happening inside the market
Yeah.
and the changes that are happening inside a market. And being a part of that change, and in fact, being a catalyst to that change.
Okay.
So what we saw is, all these data systems coming up for people to be able to process different variety and a larger volume and a larger velocity of data. Um, our place in that was to make sure that everybody can use it and it becomes a
Mm-hmm.
level playing field for engineers and analysts and even the business side of the house to be able to use these platforms. And
Yeah.
we made a couple of bets. Number one was there's going to be no one size fits all. There's not going to be
Yeah.
one system, one technology, one vendor that all these data analytics platforms are going to run on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the other part was we have to use automation to actually simplify what people are concerned with or have issues with every day. Because if you don't automate it, then not a lot of people are going to be able to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's still the crux of how we've gone on our journey with Unravel.
Mm-hmm.
So Unravel, in simple terms, is a observability platform designed specifically for data teams that are using data to create valuable business outcomes. And we help
Yeah.
them with a couple of things. Instead of using jargon, it's really simple. One is making sure that all their data pipelines and applications, whether that's analytics or AI or everything else in between, firstly run on time every time, that they can depend on them. Because only if they feel confident that this thing is going to work can their businesses depend on them. And it's really, really hard. And we'll get into that. And we've simplified that for companies. The second one is the data analytics are going to increase every day. Yesterday, we were just doing reports. Today, we're doing JNAI with data. And there's going to be more use cases that come up every day. And it's going to grow exponentially. But the costs and the efficiency of these are all often ignored till it starts to burst and become a mega problem. And we knew that by seeing some of these companies running large scale systems in very early days. And we said, you have to have something that helps out people understand how they can scale their environment in an efficient manner as well. So it's performance, reliability, cost, and then quality is such an important problem itself. To be able to solve with the data observability solution that spans across these four different things. And it's important to do that because it's the same people who are actually responsible for these things, aka the data engineers or the data operations people. And if you're not able to unify this experience for them, they're not going to be able to solve these problems holistically. You may come into a data pipeline and say, it's not working. What do you mean it's not working? Is it the quality is bad? Is the performance low? Do you have a bottleneck in a certain stage? Is it because your company has restricted the number of resources that you could be using for this? It could be n number of problems, but we saw that they had to jump in between a lot of these different tools first most to get all this information together. And that's what takes a lot of time. And then once they even had the info, understanding the cause and effect, being able to connect the dots to figure out why something happened, took them another couple of hours to a couple of days. And that's really the problem that we've solved is we bring all of this information together and then we unleash our data analytics and AI algorithms on top of this to connect the dots and to tell you in plain English, hey, your application and your stack was running like this today. These are the set of problems that you need to go and solve. And if you solve these like this, then you'll be able to run this cheaper, faster, better, more reliable. And now we're seeing companies across industries of various sizes who depend on data start to use something like Unravel.
Interesting. How many ways that I want to go? I want to go into data observability. It feels like one of the main, I don't know if you would call it a moat, but one of the main unique aspects from my perspective of Unravel is the data observability part and the ability to like summarize and like guide guide the data teams to the correct conclusions, and like you mentioned, not take days because they're so correct me if I'm wrong, but you can integrate with with Unravel. You can work with Databricks, Azure, GCP, AWS, and all cloud platforms. And the
Right.
unique value is that independently of where are your data pipelines and so on, you have this data observability on the back that helps you go faster and take better decision and have a better understanding of the entire ecosystem that you have. Would you confirm that, or would you add something to what I described?
Couldn't have said it better myself, Thomas. But let's double click because your audience, who are folks that are actually living and breathing this every day, they'll be able to understand this a little bit better. So whenever you think about a stack in data engineering or data science, it's a bunch of components from data ingestion to maybe a data lake or a warehouse, and then a bunch of analytics happening on top of that, which could be anything from streaming analytics to machine learning models to even batch analytics, reports, algorithms, which have various outputs. You could have a recommendation engine, you could have a risk assessment platform, you could be doing a customer 360, so many different quote unquote applications that you're running on top of this.
Yep.
Now, herein lies the problem. You have a multi system stack. And in some companies, you may even have a multi-cloud stack.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when a problem arises, any problem, quality problem, cost problem, reliability problem, performance problem, it usually spans across multiple different touch points in different systems. And not,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have one person that's an expert in all these different systems. And then secondly, you may have people that only understand what code they've written, and they may not understand the underlying services and infrastructure that this code is actually running on.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is we really read information, telemetry data, from every layer of the stack, both horizontally and vertically.
Mm-hmm.
And this is super important because the problem can be with the code, the problem can be with the service, the problem can be with the cloud, the problem can be with the data set. So you really have to get the full stack data
Mm-hmm.
together in one place. And then instead of just putting it all, throwing it all in one place, you have to connect the dots. You have to correlate it. And only with that correlation can you then start to get into answering questions like, show me all the jobs Thomas ran. Show me the data sets that application number 123 was actually using. What resources and infrastructure and services was this application running on? And once you've created a graph knowledge of all of these different pieces together, uh, then we apply our algorithms on top of them to say, hey, what is Thomas, the data engineer, going to be looking for? They're probably going to be looking for ways in which they can make their applications faster, in which they can meet their SLAs, in which they can guarantee performance, day after day. So we
Mm-hmm.
are hunting for inefficiencies
Mm-hmm.
automatically and saying, hey, Thomas, we've seen a way in which if you rewrite this app by using this code, it would execute much faster.
Mm-hmm.
If you partition your data in this format based on the code that we've seen, it would be a much more efficient way and a cost effective way for you to run your application.
Mm-hmm.
Or the resources that you were using, you probably are over allocating or overutilizing some of these resources. And this is what the shape of your container should look like to actually run that application in a much more reliable but also an efficient manner.
Mm-hmm.
So we have all these different lenses that the algorithms are going through all of this telemetry data and then bringing it all up to you rather than you having to go and dig into logs and metrics and graphs and
Mm-hmm.
just surfacing them and saying, hey, if you wanted to speed up performance of this, these are the two things to do. If you wanted to decrease the cost of these are the three things to do. If you wanted to make it more reliable, these are the four bottlenecks of the problems that we've seen. And that really takes these people from spending hours, days in trial and error and back and forth. From that state, they go to a state where it literally on the mobile phone and Slack, it shows up. Here are the two
Mm-hmm.
things to go and do. You press a button and it solves that problem for you. So it goes from frustration, not knowing what to do, calling up three of your friends in other departments to go stitch up that story together, to just one place telling you exactly, hey, Thomas, these are the two things to go and do those things, it'll solve your
Mm-hmm.
issue. And I think that's really enabled a lot of companies to deliver on their data analytics projects much faster.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we've seen customers that started on this journey and they said, look, we've got thousands of engineers, but they don't know Snowflake and they don't know Databricks and they don't know BigQuery. They came from the Teradata world. They know SQL, but their SQL works on this in a very different fashion than the SQL that used to work on the other data warehouse. And when they have to solve a problem over here, they don't know what to go and do. But Unravel's kind of abstracted that out for them. It doesn't matter where you're running your SQL. We're taking care of making sure everything is running properly underneath the covers. You just focus on delivering your applications and delivering your code.
Mm. Yeah, I see. I have different questions. So I have questions on the technical side. I'm thinking how much data you need to collect for an entire organization to like just
Yeah.
build a knowledge graph. Then how do you go about the problems that you're going to solve? And like what models do you need to build on top of the knowledge
Yep.
graph and so on. So we might get into this after, based on what you can share.
Sure.
I would also love to hear about federated knowledge graph. This is something I discussed, and Oli took the time and the patience to to explain me what it was, and this concept of a data catalog for the metadata. Uh, so I'm still learning on the subject, but I think it can be very interesting. So those are the two things. But before those two questions that I would love to get into, I was curious, what were the first lines of code of Unravel?
The first lines of code was actually at our university project at Duke University. Um, we had created a very specific model to fine tune map reduce parameters. What does all that mean? Whenever you run a job on Hadoop, you have to
Mm-hmm.
submit it with configuration settings, and there's
Yep.
hundreds of them, and they
Yep.
all affect the performance and reliability of that job.
Mm.
Think about them as knobs.
Yep.
They all have a setting of 0 to 100. Let's just
Mm-hmm.
say that, right? And there's hundreds of them. And just turning them a little bit here and there can dynamically change, the behavior of how this is going to run.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knew what to go and set them to.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a trial and error. It's like, okay, let me take setting number 33 and turn that a little bit this way and that way. And they would run it again. And maybe they saw performance improvements, maybe they didn't. And then they do one more iteration and then another iteration, right? So we took that very finite set of problem and we said, okay, look, let's create an algorithm that profiles this particular map reduce job. And then from there predicts what those settings should be,
Mm-hmm.
which then ultimately, does things like help you figure out load balancing, help you get rid of data skew, helps you improve
Mm.
things like parallelism, all those pieces in a very automated fashion. So that was like the genesis of where we started off.
Mm.
But it was always done with that intention of automating things, because we just knew from the get go that this environment is complicated and you really need a PhD to be able to do your things very well. But
Mm-hmm.
hey, I don't know about you, but not everybody's going to have a chance for getting a PhD and then getting on these systems. So if you can simplify it for them, that's the way to go. And honestly, that piece about automation and simplicity is the core of what's stuck with Unravel since then. And we said,
Mm.
we're going to show you what's happening. That's the baseline. But
Mm-hmm.
Unravel's way is always to tell you why something is happening and then how you can go and resolve that problem. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's where our teams, our engineers, our data scientists inside Unravel really take pride in their work,
Mm-hmm.
is to be able to get people to answers instead of leaving them with graphs and metrics and saying, here's all the information, you go figure it out. So to your previous questions that you were thinking about asking later, one simple way to think about it is the way we've built Unravel is the same way any company builds their data stack. Um, Even we have a big data problem. Instead of gathering information about customers and their behavior,
Mm-hmm.
our data is system data. And we have information about jobs and pipelines and models and the
Yep.
systems that they're running on. And it's a pretty similar problem. Like we have to ingest different varieties of data, some time series information, some log, some blob, something that's stored better in object stores. And then we've got to put all this data set together. And then we've
Mm-hmm.
got to run insights on top of that. And the models that we run on top of them can be some generic models like anomaly detection, some regression patterns. But then there are also very specific, um, you know, subject matter expertise kind of algorithms that we run on top of it, which are either system focused or application focused, that then uncover and unearth some of these different issues for the customers.
Mm-hmm. That's I have too many questions. So after the two parts that I would love to explore with you, um, like maybe getting into like how does this work in the federated knowledge graph. I think after that I would love to discuss GenAI, but more specifically, as you've been for so many times involved in the automation of the work, your stake on agents or agentic type of work, like with LLMs that can like define the steps and then like automate entire tasks. I think that that can be related, but okay. First, starting with the federated knowledge graph. So this is amazing to me, and I think we're talking about terabytes of data. I mean, obviously, it depends on like the sizes of the company and so on, but it seems massive amount of data. Um, how would you frame what's a federated knowledge graph, and how would you explain to me how do you use it at Unravel, if that's possible?
Yeah, yeah. Um, at its core, right, what you've got to do is figure out relationship between entities.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's really what it is. And when you think about observability, let's take an example. You may have a data pipeline that is run by a user that ingests data, and then another team uses the resulting data from there and does some SQL analytics on top of that, right?
Okay.
When you think about observability, you've got to be able to connect all those dots. What are all those
Yeah.
dots? Um, who's using it? Which departments they belong to? Why do you need
Mm-hmm.
that? You may want to understand who's costing and who's doing what on the environment. So it's good to connect those dots. Another
Yeah.
dot that maybe the data stewards want to connect is the data lineage piece of,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I see this graph over here that's giving me this information, but where did all this
Mm-hmm.
information come from? And being able to go, step by step backwards to see, what were the sources of this data, where were this merged, what are the results, was it correct, did it actually, result in something meaningful or not? Um, so all of that learning Unravel is doing because it has information that can connect maybe not all entities to each other from one data source, but able to extract signatures that then is able to give you information about how one entity is connected with another. For
Mm-hmm.
example, when you look at logs, it presents a lot of information about, it's got some traces in there telling you about the user ID,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't say Thomas, right? It says some cryptic number.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then we may know that cryptic number that it matches to Thomas from maybe your Active Directory information that Unravel is also absorbing. Um, and then understanding usage patterns within the cluster ID or the regional space that your AWS or your cloud provider has set up with will help us understand that this person belongs to this particular group because of this cluster here, as an example. And then we can start to connect the dots between everything else like that in a similar fashion, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's actually very interesting because if you don't have this kind of a knowledge graph working for you,
Yeah.
you've got to predefine things. You've got to tag things. You've got to set up a signature for doing these things from the get go. And guess what? Nobody does that. Or even if you set out to do that, you may not be able to have everybody do it on a consistent basis, and then you have data that's untagged or unmapped to certain entities, and that means you don't have a comprehensive holistic data set. So it's important to be able to extract these um, variables that will help you identify and then connect entities together.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually really, really tough. But once you have seen enough data sets, you'll be able to understand what they look like. And then you can take it a step further. So, your question about automation as well. Um, so one is, I mean, the way we look at it is there's several steps or levels to go from manual to automation.
Mm-hmm.
Step one is get all the data. Step two is correlation.
Mm.
So can you actually correlate things
Yeah.
and say this is the cause and that's the effect? And these two things are related in certain ways. And that also takes you quite a step further, because then you can start to do things like anomaly detection and whatnot.
Mm.
Um, then you take it a step further from anomaly detection, or any sort of pattern recognition inside your data sets, because you can connect them together, to then start understanding root causes of certain things, which
Mm-hmm.
is, can you understand why something happened, and be at least able to shortlist from the hundreds of possible things that could affect this in this way. These are the three things that I could do. And then from there, you take it to, okay, can I get a idea or a direction which I should take to solve this problem? It's still not like a pinpointed recommendation, but it
Mm-hmm.
may be try this or go in
Mm.
this direction or change that, and
Mm-hmm.
then you may have a better result. And
Yeah.
then the next level after that becomes, can I get pinpointed recommendations, like change the value of that thing from 43 to 64, and it'll be
Mm-hmm.
much better for you, to then actually taking an action on your behalf, right? Truly making it AI. Um, so those are the multiple steps, and it takes a lot of training to get all these stages correct,
Mm-hmm.
so that the customers can then depend on it. And we've been fortunate to work with some really, really large data sets in our history, and being able to train our models on these information. So we're the observability platform right now that can do automation, but automation cannot happen for every class of problem. So the next good step is providing guided remedies or recommendations to go and fix problems. And we do that for an even bigger class of problems. And then root cause analysis we do for every class of problem, right? So think about it as a pyramid,
Mm-hmm.
almost, where you have some problems that can be truly automated, and then after that you come into guided remedies for all the other problems.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is, it's not technology limited, it's actually limited by what an enterprise wants to do. There may
Yeah.
be certain things that a company says, I don't want you to automate this,
Mm.
or there may be two ways to get rid of a problem, and there's a fork in the road, and you have to choose path A or path B to solve the problem. So sometimes the user wants to be in control and saying, present to me what my options are, and I want to make the choice to doing that. And then Unravel can learn from that behavior and say, okay, I see you always do it like this. Now can I take over and automate this for you on your behalf as well? And then you can
Mm.
start to even automate further things. Um, so it's a spectrum and a sliding scale rather than an on and off switch, is the way we
Yeah.
think about it. When you think about automation, especially with observability.
Yeah. That's amazing. Uh, because you have like, so I'm thinking different things. I'm thinking like, how much compute power do you need to train those models? How big? So there is that. Then the more data you have, the better the recommendations. And I totally understand the part where some decisions or recommendations we can't, like it depends maybe on what the business or the enterprise, the company wants. And there is no like correct answer. And so I understand the pyramid. Um, and I'm also curious about, so I really like this idea of reinforcement learning. So the more you use the platform, the better we understand you. I see how this relates to the federated knowledge graph, um, where you have me, for example, with my queries, and I'm assigned to a department, and then all the departments are on the knowledge graph, and like we can do aggregation. I see the correlation part, anomaly detections, and this seems to me like a lot of data. this
Yeah,
is
yeah.
this
So
is a
so think about it like this. So Unravel internally, we have a data lake, and we've got large systems, thinking about newer models or ways to improve current models.
Mm.
But as a customer, you're running the latest version of Unravel.
Mhm.
So that's rather lightweight. And it gives you most of the things out of the box because it's already seen enough data when it says, I
Mm.
see a data set that looks similar to this. I know how to make an action on that.
Okay.
Then you think about, so that's the baseline. But then there are certain things that we're learning as we're getting more information about that particular customer.
Yeah.
So let's take a simple example like seasonality.
Yeah.
So we help customers, for example, reduce the amount of resources and use them in a better way, um, so that they can keep their costs under control.
Yeah.
That's one example. But Unravel's not going to blindly recommend to you that, hey, shrink your cluster size and auto scale it back down from 100% to 30% because you're not using it. We may have learned that on Fridays, you actually do use a lot more because you're doing some end of the week processing. And that seasonality needs to be taken into account in that automation. So you
Yeah.
want to be able to scale it down from Monday to Thursday, scale it back up on Friday and Saturday, and then turn it back
Yeah.
down.
Uh-huh.
So that's a simple example of, hey, understanding usage patterns and then evolving those models, and not only company wide, but user by user or workload by workload, the way you want
Mhm.
to configure it.
Yeah.
And that makes people feel even more confident about how it's going to be suitable for their own workloads and their ecosystems. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and all this learning again comes from our customers, right? There's
Yeah.
only so many things that we can create in our labs.
Mhm.
We pride ourselves in being a very customer focused company. And this is one of those examples where just learning all this variety of usage patterns from our customers has helped us develop the best models out there.
Mhm.
And actually, customers take us in all sorts of different directions around, hey, you guys, can you help? You've been good at helping me out with this problem. Can you help me out with this other problem? And
Mm.
we'll even take that curiously and say, sure, let's have a look. Let's see what we can learn about these pieces.
Mhm.
And that's really where our entire data FinOps journey started. Um,
Yeah.
as customers started to get to the cloud, their costs, especially on the data side, were exploding
Mm.
because you're running large data sets and the usage on data is growing exponentially every day.
Mhm.
So much so that it's now become 40% to 50% of a company's cloud bill. It's just a data analytics bill.
Mm.
And they're saying, okay, I may have some visibility from other technologies at my infrastructure level. So I'm
Mhm.
spending, for example, $5 million a year, and I understand from AWS what services I'm using for $5 million a year. But I'm running Databricks and Snowflake and Amazon EMR and Redshift and all these other things. I don't know what's happening inside them. And unless I understand what's happening inside them, I'm not going to be able to do any predictability and governance around my cost.
Yeah.
Um, so we go much deeper into these data environments because we had a lot of this telemetry data. And
Mm.
with that data FinOps product, we're able to go much more finer and much more precise
Mm.
around informing them about what's going on, optimizing what's going on, and governing
Mm.
what's going on. Right. So I'll take you through each of these in just 2 minutes. The information part is super important. So
Mhm.
I may have 500 users using Databricks, another 300 users using Snowflake, and 200 users using, that's called BigQuery, for example, right?
Mhm.
Um, I just see the total bill, but I don't know what my users are doing, and I don't know how to do a chargeback or a showback to the different departments and the user groups.
Mhm.
Remember that graph that we were talking about earlier? We can connect the
Mhm.
dots and say, you know what? Kunal and Thomas were the biggest users, and they belong to the product department, and they spent $400,000 out of the $1 million that was spent on Snowflake.
Mhm.
And by the way, they could have run the same jobs for 20% cheaper if they had done this. So we already know where the money went, but we
Yeah.
also know how you can optimize that.
Yeah.
And then we put some governance and guardrails around it and say, don't be surprised at the end of the month. Let's put a budget around Thomas that he is
Hmm.
allowed to work on $150,000 worth of Databricks and Snowflake.
Yeah.
And if he starts to come anywhere close to that, then we can, put the alarms on, flash the red lights, alert anybody that needs to be alerted, including
Hmm.
Thomas, so that they can make a proactive action around this.
Yeah.
And we're not surprised with that bill at the end of the month.
Hmm.
So having the graph helps us allocate the usage and the cost appropriately, but
Hmm.
then also guide people to what they could be doing to run this in a much more efficient manner as well. Um,
Hmm.
and that's something that came out from our customers, right? They were like, hey, we have this real problem over here, and there's a big gap in the market around just the data stack and the cost part of the data stack. Um, that we co-developed this with a lot of companies, and
Hmm.
that's actually now become like the standard for companies running large-scale data systems to use Unravel for this particular use case as well.
Hmm. Interesting. I'm thinking of different things. Uh, I'm thinking, is there a limit to the information you can gather of the customer? But so I'm thinking like Facebook, for example. Can you apply this on the massive scale of Facebook? So I don't know. That's top of my
Yes,
question.
one of the customers that we have runs about 450,000 data pipelines a day. Uh,
150,000. That's a
450,000.
that's how much? That's a lot of terabytes, no? Even
That's
more.
yeah. So if you see their data size, it's north of 10 to 12 petabytes. And if you look at the processing horsepower that these guys have, it's about 12,000 to 13,000 hosts that their environment is running on top of. I can't disclose the name of the customer. It's not Facebook, but it's a very, very large scale environment. Um,
And so on.
and they span across different regions, uh, across the world. So they have a
Hmm.
big setup in America, Europe, and Asia Pacific.
Yeah,
So that's one of the largest size systems that we
that's
actually
wild.
work on their entire production systems on.
Hmm. Okay, following up on the sector, and then I'll get onto the GenAI and automation and so on, because it really seems that since university you've been doing automation. So I think you might be pretty excited about the latest possibilities, even though like agentic systems aren't quite working yet, but this is still pretty new. But coming back to the sector, this size of data is impressive. Um, so I would assume that with a product like this, your models and your latest solution are like very based on all the customers you've been having so far. So I would assume that if you've had mainly finances customer, you might be very well aware of their use cases, pains, and when they work the most and what kind of. So my question is, do you see, do you feel like you need to have more industries as clients to like have better environment? And like this seems like kind of a yes, but I'm curious to have your insights because maybe every time there is data independently of the industry we see the same patterns or almost. So what do you think? Do you think this yeah,
Yes,
what can you share?
absolutely, Thomas. So we've been privileged to work with companies across all industries, uh, the finance sector, the healthcare and insurance sector,
Hmm.
manufacturing sector. I
Hmm.
don't have to mention it, but high technology sector, obviously, the
Yeah.
high tech sector, a lot of advertisement companies, but also like some gaming companies. Just a vast variety of companies.
Yeah.
Um, and you're right. There are both similarities and differences between these different industries and what they are doing on top of the data
Yeah.
stack. Um, so, for example, when you're doing trading or when you're doing gaming, they both
Yeah.
require streaming apps. And there's a
Yeah.
ton of information that's coming in constantly and getting updated in real time.
Yeah.
When you're doing something like risk analytics, for example, that requires streaming. When you're doing private banking and commercial banks, for example, that requires like batch processing. But that being said, as we work from company to company in an industry, what our customers love about us is we're able to recommend the best architecture and patterns, which
Hmm.
wasn't how we designed our company. It was supposed to be
Yeah.
observability, but because we've seen so many data sets, sometimes we'll go into a new company and be like, why are you guys running it like that?
Hmm.
And they go, is there a better way to run it? Like, yeah, we've seen this across different companies. And if this is the end goal, if this is the business objective to go and run it like this, then we can recommend you guys another way to be able to do this in a much more efficient as well as a performant way. Um, so that's one of the the benefits of working with such large companies and variety of industries. In the future, we will also be creating benchmarks for various industries,
Hmm.
almost like a score to help them understand how they are doing against their
Hmm.
peers.
Hmm.
And yeah, at least that'll help them understand, where they are and where they need to go in order to get to a place of high efficiency and high performance.
Okay, I see. I see. Yes, that's very interesting, and I really like the part that you mentioned. All right, so I would, I think, due to the time, I would be curious, but maybe for a part two, we'll keep the JNAI. Maybe you can comment it shortly, but mainly, I think I would love to have your like three little questions that we have at the end. Um, the first one being, so we discussed different things here, and we might skip the Gen AI question. Uh, or do you want to comment something briefly on Gen AI, and we might retake
Oh
this
yeah,
another
absolutely.
time?
Look, it's the most exciting thing that's happening right now. And we are doing two things. One, helping companies that are using Gen AI
Yeah.
use Gen AI in a more efficient as well as scalable way.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, we're using Gen AI ourselves. So I'll give you, two brief examples. One is uh, if you're asking your co-pilot to develop code for you,
Yeah.
it's developing code, but it's not developing performant,
Yeah.
reliable, and efficient code. It's developing code,
Yeah.
but you're not checking for, will this finish in 30 seconds like I need it to?
Hmm.
Will it be reliable? Will it not fail? Will it scale with the large data sets that I have?
Mm-hmm.
Will it be under budget for me? So companies are now using an Unravel right after their Copilot to say, Copilot, send the code to Unravel. Unravel, get me healthy, efficient, optimal code for running this thing. That's one way.
Hmm.
Many such examples like that. Um,
Yeah.
and then we are using now, so we have our own purpose built AI with our own knowledge graph that we've developed over all these years.
Hmm.
However, we are now including Gen AI capabilities to be able to go broader in scope
Mm-hmm.
while having the refinement of the answers we have for the data stack. And then obviously having those agents to be able to guide you to certain results that you want to go
Yeah.
to. Some of these things can be multi-step activities that you need to go and do to get a result out
Mm-hmm.
of. So actually guiding you through that. Like if you want to do some cooking, you need a recipe and you need a step-by-step guide. So
Yeah.
we're leveraging it for those kind of reasons to be able to continue to monitor the actions that you're taking and then help you get to the next steps,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is really, really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Because that, again, goes back to the same fundamental belief that we've always had is we need to simplify these things. We need to simplify it to such a level that my mom, who's not a data engineer, can start using these data environments and get value out of this. So if
Yeah,
we can do that, then we've hit it on the head.
that's awesome. All right. So last questions, and this is I want to thank you a lot for coming on the show, for sharing all those amazing details. I have more questions in mind, but we might talk again for covering them. But I really enjoy, and the crazy thing is, I really see how these systems, and we're talking about data observability, but how it can be fitted to like different usage, or like we're talking data observability in Finops. But yeah, I would have many questions here. Last question is, do you have a message for the Let's Talk AI community? It can be related to this talk, it can be like inspirational, it can be about people who are starting out in the field, anything you want.
Look, I think everybody listening to this podcast is in the best time, is at the right place at the right time for the biggest industrial revolution that we're seeing right now. Uh, Data engineers, data scientists are going to rule the world. AI is already going to run the world, as we're seeing already. And it's awesome that we've got all these enthusiasts as part of this revolution.
Awesome. Well, Kunal, thanks a lot for coming on the show. I had an amazing time, and I wish you to have an amazing day.
Thomas, thank you so much. It was fun being here. Good chatting with you. Thank you.